Welcome back to One Winning Pod. The Ravens did it. They won in the divisional round, 34-10, beating the Texans with 24 unanswered points in the second half, hosting a AFC Championship game for the first time as the Ravens, and the first time since 1970 for the city of Baltimore. A truly historic win for a historic team that isn't done writing their stories. Guys, we were just briefly talking about it, and we got to hit record. How was the vibe? How did you feel at the stadium? How relieved are you to have won this game?
Vibes to the game. Super excited, obviously. I feel like this is the first playoff game I've been to in quite some time. Great atmosphere, as always. The last couple home games at the bank, I think, have been pretty great. I feel like the having the game on Saturday and then having a full day in between before recording, good idea. I feel like my voice is recovered, so that's good. But yeah, no, I can't wait for the championship game, man. I think it's going to be great. I can't wait to be in that atmosphere. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I had no voice on Sunday. Funny story, Sunday night, I was upstairs getting my daughter ready for bed, and I needed Alice's help. So I kind of tried to shout down, that I needed her upstairs, but it really came out as a croak. And immediately as I heard it exit my mouth, I'm like, she's going to think that I tripped and fell and broke my leg or something. Cause that's the tone that came out. So of course she comes up, panicked. I'm just like, no, I just needed help getting her dressed. That's all. I needed an extra hand. Everything's fine. But, yeah, man, that was fun. And I mean, I love Lamar's post game conference, which we'll talk about at some point. This isn't the end goal for this team, right? This isn't the end goal, but man, did it feel good to savor that coming out of the stadium, just walking down the ramp. It just kind of hit me because I'm like, these moments don't come too often in a fan base, right? This is the first time in a decade that the Ravens have made it this far. We're obviously fans of the Orioles as well. They were able to make the ALCS in 2014, baseball's equivalent of this. So it's been a while. It's been a while since we've had a Baltimore team make it this far, and let's see if they can make the full thing, right? So, celebrated it Saturday night, and then woke up Sunday, and I was like, all right, that was fun. We're on to Kansas City.
I feel like you could feel a weird energy in the beginning of the game, just like the anticipation and the nervousness. I feel like, the Texans offense came on the field first, right? So Ravens defense was on the field, and obviously everybody's up, everybody's yelling, high energy kind of thing. But then the offense got on the field, and I felt like no one sat down. Everyone was just standing up. We were just waiting for a score. We just it's like everyone needed that first touchdown and then the lead to begin before we'd feel comfortable. Because I think everybody in their minds was just they're looking obviously back at 2019. They're like, oh my God, we're going to come out and collapse immediately. And unless we see the team start to get going right now, this energy is just, everyone's going to be wired for it. And, obviously, the game was a little bit close in the first half. We'll talk about it. Second half, things started going away, and, the Ravens ended up running away with it. And I think the energy, everyone calmed down. They were like, okay, all right, we're going to get out of here with a win. We can celebrate, and now we can move on to the next one now that we've got the monkey off our back.
Yeah, so I was saying right before we started that I felt like Chris was like a therapist for me, a helper, a guide, a Sherpa of my emotions during this game because, 24 unanswered, that felt really good. But that 10-10, I just had a sour taste in my mouth where I was like, man, we should be up by more. I don't like this. They're clearly the better team. It reminded actually me, just thinking about it now, this is exactly what the conversation was at the Texans game week 1, where we're like, we should be beating them by more. This is ridiculous. Where are the points? Right? And Lamar got those points, and I felt so much better. Boom, we got the 7. I was like, okay, feels good. And they got that big stop, and I was like, yes, awesome. And then they scored again, and we're like, woo! Okay, now we're talking. Now we're living the dream. And Chris, he was there for me. He helped me get hot hands in my feet because I couldn't bend over. I was so stuffed up with all this stuff, I couldn't even really move. I was trying to say so warm with all these layers. I was basically like the Michelin Man waddling with all the layers.
You were so miserable going into halftime. I was like, is it the cold? Is it the game? And you're just like, everything.
I was just like, the cold wasn't really the primary thing. I was just like, guys, it would feel like it was 73 and sunny if you were just winning already. And then they started winning, and I did feel like it was 73 and sunny, you know?
Yeah.
And those hand warmers were game changer, though. I mean, I too had to swap out in the third quarter, mainly the foot ones. I think the hand ones lasted the entire game. But, yeah, I mean, it was easy, though, I felt, to take your mind off the weather, like you said, once they started winning. It was, just good thing after good thing happened. Lamar Jackson had an incredible game. Feels so good for him. Yeah, I mean, of course, for the whole team, but for him to finally get that monkey off his back of, I think all of us on this pod felt that it was inevitable. He's too good of a quarterback for him to continue to go throughout the rest of his career and put up the games that are subpar to his ability that he had put up to date in his short playoff career that he had. He probably would have been able to put a similar type of game together in 21 or 22 had he been healthy. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. But, now he's got that. He's got that in the back of his mind. If there was ever any doubt, which I don't think there was for him, you can look at that and say, look, he can do the same things in the postseason that he can do in the regular season. And it's all going to be just, one foot in front of the other now from this point on.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like that kind of has a good segue to go into the offense. I feel like we should kind of talk about it. But the first half, like we were kind of saying earlier, it was a little bit shaky. I think, there was a one good drive in there where we were able to get a touchdown. But as far as, the rest of it, I think the Texans had a lot of success, particularly in the blitz. We really just lacked a lot of answers. Lamar took a couple sacks, had to hang on the ball a little bit longer than he wanted to. And, just weren't able to have those consistent drives down the field. But kind of looking at the second half as well, second half adjustments were great. I think Monken had a great adjustments the second half. They started opening up the pass game a little bit, getting the ball out a little bit quicker on a little bit short routes. And, you started to see a lot of success both in the pass game and the run game as well.
Yeah, that adjustment is unreal. I was getting frustrated with Lamar a little bit because I was like, you either need to like pass the ball, like have trust that your guys are going to get open downfield if you're trying to do these long concepts, or like go to the short game. And they chose the latter. So they went to the short game, and it's really interesting, the stats. So in the first half, Lamar tried 3.92 seconds per pass play, 7 for 11 for 52 yards and 3 sacks. And in the second half, it was 2.48 seconds per time to throw, 9 for 11, 100 yards, 0 sacks. So basically doubled the production with less time in the pocket, with the same amount of attempts, and no sacks. Huge turnaround in success rate, and really one of the big reasons the offense started moving. And I thought that was a great adjustment. I'm glad, he and Monken were able to have that conversation and, write the course for the offense. And I really did feel like Lamar, truly was demonstrating to all of the NFL why he's the MVP. His ability to take the game into his own hands, score 4 touchdowns, which, like, if you listen to my whole prediction, I said like he was going to throw 4, and then I switched it to like, we'll have 4 touchdowns. Like, I kind of like changed the wording. So I feel like I don't really get credit for that. But I'm glad that he was involved in so many touchdowns and led us to victory, obviously. And the stats already gone around, but like only quarterback in history to have 100 yards rushing, 100 yards passing, 2 touchdowns in both passing and running in a game in the playoffs. So definitely a very cool and unique performance by Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, and then it's funny. I feel like if that game had gone a little bit differently Sunday night, I feel like Josh Allen would have been somewhat close. At least he had the rushing touchdowns, but maybe not the yards. But in any case, certainly I think it was good. It was good for him to kind of put the team on his back, a little bit, and just continue to show why he's the leader of this team, right? Everyone had his back, and Lamar is able to kind of put up a performance that we know he's capable of. So, Yeah, kind of going in, not just Lamar, all over the team, but I mean, a couple shout outs. I feel like the O-line, we kind of got to talk about those guys. I feel like the extra rest, particularly for Stanley, and even Moses, I think was pretty great. Stanley, I think, had one of his best games. I mean, a couple of those great plays of those, fake runs, have Lamar kind of sneak out the left side. Stanley's been the lead blocker. Was able to get out in space, make a block, and let Lamar do his thing. That was on the one play for one of his rushing touchdowns, I believe, was over on that side. And I feel like that was one of his best games. Still did rotate with McCary a little bit for a couple of drives, but great game from him. And obviously, I think on the other side, like you said, the Texans were able to get some pressure. We get a couple of sacks on some of those guys. But I think from the tackle situation, I feel like I came out of that game, pretty happy with where we were at.
Did you guys check or were able to see either while watching live or on the replay, Ronnie Stanley on the long completion to Bateman?
I see that in the notes. I didn't note it, but let's hear it, man.
I definitely recommend anyone who hasn't rewatched that play and watched the offensive line to watch that play, because I didn't notice it real time, particularly from, I was at a different section than you guys for this game. I was at the end zone seats. You guys were at the sideline. Much easier to watch the downfield play, and everyone was shouting at that time for Lamar to throw him to Bateman, because he had Bateman open for about 3 seconds. It felt like downfield before that completion was finally made. But Stanley on that play, man, he gets a great jump off in number 95, Derek Barnett for Houston. He starts bull rushing him. He does a spin move. Stanley's not phased at all. His footwork's still there, and Barnett just runs out of energy, and Stanley just pancakes him flat on the ground, and Lamar still has another half second back there before he lets it go. Highly recommend people look that up, that play. It was at quarter 3, 4 minutes, 58 seconds left to go. Just Ronnie he's back. You just need to see that play. And that play is an all-pro tackle, just absolutely schooling a guy, not having any issue at all with this guy, this guy's moves. And just look, we'll see if it maintains, because obviously we know Ronnie, he's been battling a lot with his body, but to see that he's still capable of making that play was huge to me. And like Chris was saying, there was a lot of other great plays he made too, but that play was just incredibly dominant and just reminiscent of what this guy used to be able to do on a week in, week out basis. So that was incredible to see. I think one of the best performances in this game of great performances was Ronnie Stanley's game, particularly in the second half. Just an excellent performance by this guy.
Yeah, it definitely makes you wonder what they're going to do in the offseason. I, for one, didn't really see, everyone in Ravens Twitter is like, oh, we got to cut him, get that $8 million back. And I was like, I feel like that's too much, or that's too little gain. I mean, I guess you get the 15 if you did the June 1st designation, but then it spends money next year too. I was like, I feel like I just keep him around because he's a solid, player, and he has upside. We're discussing here. And after seeing that play and other plays, he had the best game of his whole season, and hopefully he can keep stacking into the playoffs. That changes it. I feel like it really does. It might really change the way the team views. He truly was just injured, and that was kind of what was slowing him down from playing well. Because end of last year, I thought he was playing like Ronnie Stanley. He looked like he wasn't maybe as dominant as he once was, but he was clearly above average and still pretty good, and not a total waste of the salary money. So I hope so. Now the other guy who kind of solidified the other direction for me is Simpson. He had more penalties in this game. I saw him getting beat and running downs and pass downs. I was just like, man, he's just hit average. I feel like he's not good enough to want to keep long term. He's a fine piece to have, as a backup, but I don't want to necessarily have him be my starter long term. I'm hoping to find a better option.
Yeah, I mean, for the playoffs, he's the guy. I mean, I don't think there's anybody else we can kind of sub in, but I'm sure later in the off season, hopefully sometime in February, if things go to plan, we can talk about that a little bit. But obviously we'll have Cleveland, we'll have Voorhees as well, and maybe we'll draft another guy. Could be an option, but
that's solid.
But yeah, I feel like Salah as well. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, overall, I mean, I think from a pass blocking perspective, yeah, I would tend to agree. I think Simpson had a little bit of a down game this time. I didn't take a close look, for the whole game, but I thought there were a few negative plays that I saw from Zeitler as well. But he kind of exited the game a little bit early.
He got flat out
Cleveland came
pancaked
in
on one of those sacks towards the end of the ground. He was just completely blown back on his back. Was not great to see.
Yeah, that was the play I was thinking of as well. Yeah, so I mean that one's a little bit concerning. But then again, as far as what we needed in this game, I think like we kind of saying earlier, I think the offense adjusted, right, and so it didn't feel like it was a situation that was dire. Lamar was getting the ball out pretty quickly. The run game was also wearing down the Texans defense as well, from which we'll talk about. So run blocking I felt was pretty good. We put up, gosh, I want to say over 200 yards, something close to it. Lamar at 100, obviously. Justice Hill at a bunch. So, yeah, I mean, all in all, I think a pretty successful day overall for the offense, even if individuals on the line weren't as good.
Yeah, I'm not terribly interested about next year yet. We'll figure out. I'm sure the front office will figure out what they're doing with Ronnie, what they're doing with Simpson. I mean, but if you can't look ahead, you just got to look. I'm not even thinking about the Super Bowl. I'm just thinking about what we've got. The Ravens have right ahead of them, and the guys they got. So I think that there are definitely concerns with the veteran that you have on this team. So you'd like some guys to be healthier than are, but I think overall, when Lamar was able to, take what the defense gave him, settle down, I think the offensive line looked a lot better. I still would have liked the pass protection as a whole to have been better. I do think that some of the sacks that you saw in the second quarter, some of the plays that weren't able to develop, some of it I think was on Lamar trying to do too much, but some of it was also just, the offensive line not giving him quite as much time as you would like. But hey, look, it is still the unit that gives me the most concern, honestly, of any unit on this team as far as what could go wrong and hold the Ravens back from ultimately holding Lombardi at the end of this year. But yeah, I think you saw strong things from Stanley. Linderbaum had a great game again. Some great blocking on in the run departments, particularly. Hopefully it's enough. I don't know. I don't know. The Chiefs, I think, will be their own trouble. And even though we've already, beaten both the Lions and the 49ers pretty big this year, if you have to go against either of them, they've got guys who can rush the passer as well. So the good news we've got here, though, I mean, I know we already talked about Lamar, but I think we still have to emphasize the fact that Lamar has been able to maintain his rushing ability while continuing to get better as a passer. It's officially just unfair for defenses. Just they have to guard the whole field now, and he can just run it up if everything's covered. I mean, it is incredible to see this guy operate. Some of the runs that he had were just, I mean, the defense had everything covered, and still he would be able to get a big gain. So, certainly front seven, the offensive line, you'd like it to be a little more solid, but when you got a quarterback like Jackson back there, I think the Ravens can work with it.
There it is, man. I think that's why he was smirking. They said that they took the governor off of him and go run, go win us a football game for the next, 3 games. Just go do it. Be you. And I can live with that. I can live with a regular season of running the offense at 75% capacity to try and up our odds of keeping Lamar at 100% capacity for the playoffs. Because then, you put the pedal to the metal. So it's impossible, man. Like the way he plays, that's kind of why, like in a way, I'm happy that Josh Allen's out, because he tries to play a version of that kind of game too, where he'll like run it after you. He doesn't see something downfield. It's tough, man. I don't know how it's hard to beat those kind of quarterbacks and have a successful day as a defense. So Roquan says it all the time. Like he's glad to be on the other side, and I think they're right. Like I would love to see an alternate universe. I guess it's practice where the Ravens defense actually goes against Lamar Jackson, because like it's tough, man. It's tough.
Yeah, I mean, some of those plays were just unfair. I'm thinking of like the designed QB run, be able to get Lamar's first touchdown. I mean, spread him out wide. Everybody's covering him in pass, and there's a wide open hole in the middle. Like, not even fair. It wasn't like he was even that close to the goal line either. I think it was like a 12-yard run or something. Yeah, plenty of plays like that. It was kind of, it feels almost kind of funny, right? I feel like Houston, when they kind of started up in the game, they're like, okay, we're going to cover the pass and they force you to run. I'm like, okay, like, usually it's the other way around. But in this case, like Lamar's like, all right, I'll take that all day. Like, I don't have a problem with that. And ended up, being the leading rusher of the team. But that kind of goes into another good segue, though, with just the run game. Just kind of want to give a couple shout outs. I feel like, for me, Justice Hill was a great like 1-2 punch with Lamar in this game. I think Justice had a lot of great runs. I feel like he's definitely been trending up in this latter half of the season. I still like, even in the last couple of weeks, I think I had said, a couple of things of like, hey, looks great, but there's still some things I think he'd like to clean up. I feel like this game, like he just looked excellent. Was consistently getting, big runs on second down and putting the offense in third and manageable situations. Looked great, and even toward the end of the game, they still had him in there being able to pick up big plays. Pass protection also, consistently great. And, a weapon in the passing game, too. Just, a safety net for Lamar to be able to pass that ball underneath when he needs to. I really think he was probably one of the underrated Ravens in this game.
Yeah, I mean, it was I felt it was a strong day for all the Ravens running backs. Justice Hill, I'm pretty sure that was a career high in rushing yards for him, over 5.1 yards per carry. Really effective there. Gus Edwards, very pedestrian line, but I feel like he ran hard. He was able to get some good chunk runs. This is not, not too long ago, it was easy to run against this Houston Texans defense, right? They were for years among the league's worst, and a couple of years where they were the absolute worst in the league at stopping the run, constantly getting gashed by Derrick Henry and Jonathan Taylor. But this year really shored that up. That I had some concern that we would have some difficulty running there. And granted, yeah, with the running backs, it wasn't the easiest yards that we've seen them get all year, but they continued at it. The Ravens were consistent with it. The game plan was consistent with it. And, you got good things out of it. And we even got to see a little bit of Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook came out there late in the game, rocking number 31. His first carry as a Raven was longer than his longest carry as a Jet. So adds a little bit of, credence to the theory that he was a bad fit for the Jets and still has a little more left in the tank. We'll see. I have a coworker who's a Vikings fan, and he is predicting next week that Dalvin Cook will have 150 yards rushing, 40 yards receiving, and Lamar Jackson will just sit back in a recliner in the pocket and not have to do anything and rest up for the Super Bowl, which I'm all for if that happens. I'm not seeing that, but it is nice to see that Dalvin Cook it could be a guy that can, offer us, 2 or 3 plays a game and still, be another guy back there. Is he going to fill Keaton Mitchell's holes? I don't know. I mean, Keaton Mitchell's hole. I don't know what I meant there by multiple holes to Keaton Mitchell, but anyways,
moving on.
Moving on. Yes, exactly. Keaton Mitchell was so explosive, and Dalvin Cook, even if he has, some left, I don't think he's the same guy as he was in his absolute prime. But it's enticing. Like I said last week, it's enticing that he could add another dimension to this offense, just be another playmaker that we can throw out there.
It's good knowing that he exists, is what I'll say. I felt like, Gus got a little banged up, and then he came in and played a little bit more, and he had that 19-yard run, and it looked like he could be a replacement for Gus if necessary. Similarly, I think if Hill gets banged up, you could go on Dalvin. He's like a nice right in between back, and he seemed just fine. I upgrade over Melly, and it's good that he's there. I definitely appreciate it. Glad that Hill looked as good as he did. And he's definitely a guy who's contributing to this team and a big part of this run. And we'll go from there. But I definitely do want to like point out a couple players. Likely didn't get a snag in the first half, and then boom, early in the second, had a huge series of events. Big catch, big yak, stiff arming down the sideline, and then there was like a near interception where Lamar didn't throw it up, and then he was like, showing like just loft it to me. Later in the game, boom, lost it, snags it out of the air, touchdown. I was like regretting not betting on the likely touchdown, anytime touchdown, because he did it again. And it's just one of those things. He does it every week. It seems like every week, likely's finding a way in the end zone. Super productive at the end of the year, and a guy that you're excited to have on this team long term for cheap, and makes you wonder like what they can do with him and Andrews if more hyperbaric oxygen is being used and he's available.
Yeah, likely continues to look awesome. Yeah, man, his stiff arm is absolutely lethal. I mean, he took Desmond King for like 10 yards or something like that, something crazy. And the touchdown as well. I mean, it was a great adjustment. Kind of Lamar could have put it a little bit behind likely for him to adjust back to it, and completely took Stingley out of the play. He kind of caught it over his head. That was a great throw from Lamar, great catch. And I mean, it's going to be great, man. I'm really looking forward to it. I thought Andrews would be close for this game. I really hope that we can see him back for the championship game, even if it's not full-time Mark Andrews. Like, we don't need to have him 90% of snaps. Like, we don't need that Mark Andrews. But I mean, if you could find a way to get him productive for a couple plays and get likely productive for a couple plays, like, I mean, sheesh, man, just watch out. Like, I mean, likely's great. Likely is definitely great on high leverage plays, and if you need a big play down the field or you need a touchdown, like, go to likely. If you're in a 3rd and long situation and you got to get guys deep and you need somebody underneath to just find some space, like, put Andrews in on that, man. Like, it's great. I love that Lamar has been adjusting to life without him, but if we can find a way to have both of them back and kind of utilize their strengths for that, like, I mean, man, that'd be great. We're playing at already such a high level without him. I feel like adding him back, it's just like that's the missing piece. That's the thing that's going to propel us over the top if he's able to make it.
It's fascinating to look back on the 2022 draft and see. I mean, which honestly, it still looks like a very promising tight end class. But you look at some of these tight ends that were drafted before likely, Jelani Woods, Jeremy Ruckert, Daniel Bellinger, some other guys who have also done really well in Cade Otton and Jake Ferguson. But I mean, and Chig was drafted just 4 picks after the Titans and by the Titans after we took likely. But man, was that such a great find by this coaching staff, by the scouting department. It's likely it's just the athleticism that he has, and he's just such a good fit for what the Ravens like to do. I mean, do I view him as a replacement to Mark Andrews? I don't. I know some people look at Andrews' contract and will say like, oh, look, likely he's really productive too. I think that what Andrews does is just very few tight ends in league history are able to do what he's done. And that's not to take anything away from likely, because I think he has an incredible talent set as well that has a lot still left to be unlocked. And like you're saying, when Andrews comes back, the Ravens are really going to need to find ways to where they're both focal points in this offense. And just, I mean, at that point, you're adding a huge dimension here. But yeah, likely it's incredible to see him step up. We've talked about it before, just wasn't making plays early in the season, wasn't part of the game plan. He stepped right up, and he's made this offense continue to click. Not much more to say. I mean, it's just continuing to make big plays when called upon.
Similarly, I feel like Bateman has been stepping up and making big plays, catch for first downs, that 20-yard one that we were talking about with Stanley having the great block. And he's a guy that just like, I think he really has taken on his role in the team. He knows what it's going to be for this year. And I think this is a good year for him, even if it wasn't what we all wanted as far as a huge breakout. And I still believe in him. I think long term that he could really make another step next year when kind of need this year almost as a reset and gain trust with himself, gain trust with Lamar and all that. And we'll see. Cause we do have a lot of targets, man. We're talking about likely Mark Andrews, Zay Flowers, OBJ, Aguilar had a touchdown this game and, produces when he's called upon. I mean, just people all over in the pass catching department that are trusted and can get the job done and have done it at some point this year for a game or two. So that's what I think is awesome about this offense. It's so multiple. There's so many places we can go, and it might be a total terror for fantasy or DFS. You never know who's going to score the touchdowns, but you know they're going to be scored, and that's what matters for winning football games.
Unselfish football. That's what it is. That's what has had to take this year. I think that's always what it's going to take in a Lamar Jackson offense. He can throw it, obviously, but when you have that threat to run it as well as he can, he's going to get his carries. So that, of course, is going to dilute the number of targets to go around. It requires a lot of good team guys. And, we obviously don't have a huge window. Every now and again, the coaches, Harbaugh will say things in a press conference. He at one point hinted to the fact that likely early in the season was getting frustrated that he wasn't a part of it and had to just be talked up and just, let known that, his time would come. And obviously he stuck to it and he's performing now. His numbers called upon. I feel like Bateman has been in a similar boat. He's had to have a lot of patience. He's slowly getting more and more in the offense, and we'll see. He's contributing now. He's definitely a part of this offense. Is it exactly a starring role? No, but he's valuable, like we're saying. I will say one thing with him. I've seen enough of him to know that I'd like to see a little bit more reliable hands. I think that there are times when the ball goes his way that I get a little nervous that it might be a drop. And sometimes, maybe not the best technique there with catching, but look, he's getting open. And when he has the ball in his hands, he can be a playmaker. So, yeah, I still think that there's a huge ceiling for this guy. Is it this year? Is it in the future? Hopefully it's with us because it'll be with someone. But yeah, just continuing to be excited for the guy that he's getting opportunities and he's making the most of the little that he's being, little opportunities that he has.
We'll definitely get more into it next week. Well, not next week, next episode when we talk about the Chiefs. But I feel like he's definitely going to be the dark horse against the Chiefs because, you're looking at it now. Zay, obviously, one of the focal points of this passing attack, but he's going to be going up probably against All-Pro McDuffie. And so if you're looking at the other matchups there, I feel like whoever's lined up, not against McDuffie, I think is probably going to have those opportunities come his way. So Bateman, if you're listening, I think it's a great opportunity for you to step up next game, man.
Yeah, like you said, Zay Flowers. He it was not his A game, but he did produce a little bit. Seeing here that he had 24% of the target share, which is pretty high, I guess, but definitely felt as though it wasn't necessary, I guess. I don't know. like I said, there's so many people to throw the ball to that they just didn't feel the need to do anything too crazy with Zay Flowers. But he had that big catch down the sideline where he got open for the first down. That was huge. And he also was able to turn upfield and zigzag. He could have probably just kept going straight and got more yards, but he tried to do another juke, another highlight.
Yeah, that was one concern I did have there. It did feel like you said, he did have that one catch where he was able to get upfield. But I felt like the Texans had a plan to kind of contain what he's able to do after the catch. And it was the first time I felt, that I could remember, maybe it had happened earlier in the year, that his after the catch ability was kind of, given some pushback and neutralized a bit. Now, of course, I think that the Texans probably over-prepared in, their game plan with him, considering the fact that of how big of a focal point he was in the first matchup, right? I mean, if I were them, I would make sure that he didn't do that again. And, he had a pretty pedestrian game compared to that first game. But, still, when called upon, he had some clutch catches. I really hope we see more of him as it goes on because I feel like against the Chiefs, that's going to be a much closer game than this one. And it's going to require a big game from him, even if other guys are stepping up, because with Andrews out, I mean, he's the clutch guy. He's the guy that's been stepping up in those close games. Obviously, he did against the Rams. He did against the Chargers. He's making plays in tight situations. So we're going to need him to be a big part of that game against the Chiefs. But still, good for this game because we didn't really need him to do more than he did, but hopefully better going forward.
I think we should continue burying the lead just a little bit more and talk about special teams before we talk about defense. Because special teams, I think, was notable. It was worth making some notes about special teams. I think Stout had the worst game of his career, and it wasn't just the punts. So, like, obviously he had that like weird like shank punt that wasn't for a good distance, and then he had what I saw was a bad hold. So it didn't really matter much, I guess. But the 30-31 extra point attempt, if you see it, he kind of bobbled the ball getting it down for Tucker, and it was a little bit of a wayward kick. It still went through the upright. It wasn't wide right like Bass's game tying kick, but it definitely was an operational error. And then obviously the punt did get returned for a touchdown later in the game that wasn't shanked, and it's just like, man, like bad day for Stout, bad day for the punt team in general, and like I said in the notes, I'm not an expert in special teams coverage. It's probably like easily my weakest thing of like the schemes, but it felt to me as though they had 8 guys all the same like layer of defense. It looked like engage 8, and once he broke through that line, it was like the clown squad of Ott and Stout, like the snap, the long snapper, and the punter being like, "We got this, we can stop him." Did not stop him.
The ironic thing is you rewatch that replay, and I don't know if this is a totally fair comparison, but it looked like Simpson actually may have been able to complete the tackle had Stout not been there. Yeah, it looked like Simpson was starting to get his arm around. Would he have been able to complete the tackle? I don't know, but Stout certainly was just in the wrong place at the wrong time and didn't help, what we'll say. But yeah, weird game for him, especially considering the fact that he actually punted really well, had a really good game in the wild card game last year at Cincinnati. So not necessarily a case of playoff jitters, maybe. You do wonder, I was actually thinking about this going into the to our seats, with the cold, how it has to be so difficult for special teams guys to perform in the cold weather. Because I mean, a lot of those guys are just on there for a couple plays. So you're just on the sideline. You have to find some way to keep your muscles warm, to keep your legs fresh, and then go in and have to perform at top athletic performance. That's not easy. And Stout's young. I'm not saying that that's what happened, but I could certainly see that being something that could explain it, because he's had a great season this year, and it was an incredibly uncharacteristic game for him. So hopefully just, a one-game hiccup, outlier in what's already been a pretty solid start to his career. But yeah, it was definitely not his best performance. And I don't think it took, too discerning of an eye to see that.
Yeah. Even the best teams sometimes let him up. 2000 Ravens, case in point. Only touchdown they let up in the Super Bowl was a special teams touchdown. It happens. So I'm not too worried about it. We can be in certainly worse situations, i.e. Buffalo Bills fans. That's not a great situation. That definitely costs the game. In this case, not a huge deal. Let's just hope he's got time to turn around.
There were good things in special teams too that we need to get to. Justin Tucker drilled the 53-yard field goal to start the scoring for the Ravens on that first drive. Surprisingly, I guess, longest field goal converted in Ravens playoff history was that 53-yarder. And Justin Tucker's kicked for so long in so many playoff games, you would have thought it would have been longer than that, but that's the longest. So good news for the long range of Tucker's leg there. And Devin Duvernay and the coverage team coming out of halftime, that play, just him getting the ball there, running it close to midfield. I think it's about the 47-yard line. Immediate win coming out of halftime, because immediately even if you don't score there, which obviously they went down and got a touchdown, which is exactly what you want. That's the best case scenario. But immediately you start the first half in that situation in a tie game ahead, because you're already up ahead in the field position battle. So, I mean, that play I thought was incredibly important for this win. I feel like it's a play that's going a little overlooked in the discussions of the game. Isn't even shown in the highlight reel on NFL.com for the game. They skip right over it. But I felt that was huge for them to come out and do that play. I know watching it live, I got really excited. I felt right away like the halftime worked. Like they went in, adjustments were made. They're going to come out here and it's going to be a big half. And lo and behold, that's what we saw.
Definitely huge. Yeah, I feel like that kind of kickstarted a couple of good drives that they had in the second half too. Long drives that ended in touchdowns. I feel like there's one that, it may have not been that drive, but it was the next possession that the Ravens had the ball. It was like a nice 6-minute drive capped with the touchdown. And then the fourth quarter, they did the similar thing, kind of like nice 5-6 minute drive, cap it with a touchdown. And, between those two and, obviously the defense doing their thing, which we'll talk about, that kind of, it was the perfect situation, I think, for the Ravens in terms of, field position, time of possession, things like that. Definitely great play from Duvernay. I feel like, his season this year is definitely not as gone as expected, with his injury. Missed a couple of games. Obviously, Wallace had a couple big special teams play as well. So I feel like he kind of took a back seat for a little bit, but he is Devin Duvernay. He's done a lot of good things for us, and I feel he's another guy, man. I feel like I talked about Justice Hill earlier, had a really great game. I feel like Duvernay, is another guy who really, I think, is one of those guys who you can probably rely on to make a big play. I don't know when it's going to happen, if it's going to be against the Chiefs or if we make it to the next game, Super Bowl. But I feel like he's due for another one of those, big plays to kind of, break the game open.
Complimentary football is the name of the game, man. Like you said, in the second half, the offense was cooking, and the defense didn't do nothing. Didn't allow for anything. It was wild. So we got the lead is now here. The defense, man, is the star of the show. I love Lamar Jackson. It was an awesome performance. I think it meant a lot for him to win a playoff game in that stage, and have a big performance and show the world. But man, this defense is why I'm so bullish about the Ravens, because as they say, if they can't score, they can't win. And the Texans never ran a play inside the 25-yard line. They scored 3 points. It was at the end of the first quarter. It was so clear that they were going to have some real trouble scoring. They started breaking out triple reverses, pitches that got blown up and snuffed out. You could tell they were trying everything. They did they got to the line quick. They tried a hurry up offense, which I don't think we've ever seen people try to do a hurry up mid game just to throw us off. They tried anything possible and none of it worked. They were outmatched. This defense absolutely destroyed. They let up 3 and they were ticked off about it. You could tell. I remember Queen was distraught that he didn't pick the ball off when it went over his head to Nico Collins. This defense wanted to give up 0 points, and I guarantee they were ticked off about 3.
Yeah, it's wild, man. It's wild at how good they're playing. I feel like it was immediate. I think from the first couple of times that they handed the ball off to Singletary, that they were no, you're not going to run all game. You're gonna try, and you're not going to get anything. You're going to get tackled for loss. And from there, like you said, it just kind of snowballed. It was really funny just how deep the offensive playbook they were trying to go to be able to get anything going. And like you said, none of it worked.
And I think that's also what made the first half so frustrating, right? Because it was so clear that the defense was just miles ahead of where the Houston Texans offense was. Like you said, they were digging deep in the playbook. Stroud wasn't sacked, didn't have a pick all game, but I mean, it felt like every time he dropped back, the Ravens were forcing him to backpedal, which, I mean, it allowed him to not get sacked, but obviously it made it much harder for him to complete passes, and that's what ended up happening. Stroud looked every much as the rookie that the Ravens defense should have been able to make him look like the Browns should have been able to last week, And with all due respect to Stroud, I think he's going to be a great quarterback in this league. I think he already is. But it's just, you just look at NFL history, like we talked about last week. Rookie quarterbacks very rarely are able to perform well in the postseason. And if they are, it's generally because of a failure of the defense that they're facing, not as much as what they're doing. So some of it, I think the performance was just the Ravens allowing, making sure that Stroud looked like a rookie. But I also think we can't just downplay the fact of how dominant they were. Like you said, rushing, they got 42% of their rushing yards for the game on a single 16-yard carry by Devin Singletary. You take that out, and they averaged less than 2 yards per carry on the game for rushing. The rushing defense was incredibly stout, which, I mean, I think you look at that and you're like, okay, well, it was Devin Singletary. I mean, he's had a couple games this year, but he was on the Texans for a reason. But we got to remember, there's been games this year where the run defense just hadn't shown up against opponents that they should have been able to dominate, like Arizona or some of the games against Cincinnati. I think Mixon ran a little better against us than he did against other teams. Jacksonville, there were some games where the rush defense wasn't as good, and they were dominant. And I mean, we can talk about the pass defense too, because there were a lot of great things there, like Brandon Stevens and Ronald Darby. I mean, did they let up a couple catches? Sure. I mean, most of them were underneath stuff to the tight end, but again, no Marlon Humphrey. And again, this unit is able to step up, which is, I mean, we've said it every game it's happened this year because it keeps happening, but it's still just so astounding that we've been able to get this depth. And we can't talk about the secondary, the corners, without talking about Arthur Millette. We're talking about how the pass rush was able to get to Stroud, knock him out of his rhythm, out of his game. I mean, Millette had some key blitzes there as well, and definitely had some hurried passes there, caused some hurried passes by Stroud. Just across the board, those three guys, Stevens, Darby, Millette, maybe not perfect games from that trio, but pretty darn close.
Yeah, I feel like there was I can't remember if it was just an incompletion or something, but it was Millette on a blitz. I think it was in the second half of the game. And I think it may have been either an incompletion or maybe a shot got rid of the ball and somebody got it, and maybe it was a tackle for a loss or something. But there was a great, Millette was just kind of like on one knee. I wish somebody had taken a picture of that. Maybe they have. But I thought it was just a great great image of him, and I think of how he's been playing. Yeah, definitely like great player in coverage, very sticky guy, plays a lot larger than his size. I mean, he's a pretty small dude, and great on these corner blitzes when McDonald's like to send him from the slot, and but like you said, man, like all these corners. I mean, the best thing about this is Marlon's injury. And we have no idea how long he's going to be out. These guys are going to have to continue to play well, and they keep doing it. I mean, remember week 1 against the Texans, Marlo was out there as well. And we saw the great play from Stevens, and we saw a little bit of Darby and Rock at that point, and we were pretty impressed week 1, and they just keep doing it, man. Stevens in particular, I feel like has cleaned up a lot of the penalties. He was a guy, he's very physical, obviously, and can get called for some of that stuff downfield. But overall, very sticky and tackles well, and yeah, they're doing great. I'm really looking forward to their matchup against the Chiefs. I really think that we've got some guys who can really do some damage. And obviously, with the Chiefs and their, wide receiver group being a little bit more depleted than in years past, I think it's a matchup that looks at, really great for us going into next week.
Ooh, I love to talk about that. But first, the thing is, the big nasties did their job. Pierce, Matabike, Jones, Clowney were so disruptive in this game. It's unbelievable. They figured out they could stop the run with the 6, adding Rowe and PQ. They could be in lighter personnel and stop the run effectively, like Peter mentioned. And then in the same turn, they were able to pass rush with just 4 guys. They didn't have a need to blitz. And even though they recorded no sacks, they pressured Stroud on 40% of his dropbacks. And, I mean, it showed. Or actually, 50% of his dropbacks. And it showed. Like, the guy was constantly under pressure, constantly getting flushed out. They did what I said. I was like talking to Jason. He was like, "What do you think they're going to do about Tunsil? Do you think you can put in like Owe against him, Clowney, whatever?" And I was like, "I think they're going to just have Owe like sprinting at him all game long." And that's what they did. They were like, "Owe, it's going to be tough, but use your athleticism, get past Tunsil a couple times," and he did. He never got home, but he flushed him out. And Stroud, it's interesting. He got out of the pocket a lot intentionally before the pressure got there. But I felt like he just, did you guys notice, he didn't throw any darts. Like sometimes you see people roll out and they throw darts. He was like just like lofting balls to the guys, and like sometimes it worked, usually it didn't, and other other times it was just like an incompletion or like going out of bounds. Like I was like kind of surprised like that he didn't throw more darts when on the move. It just seemed like he was always like lofting the ball, like the touch passes,
Yeah, I mean, that could have been intentional, right? It could have been something the Ravens wanted to do. Like, hey, we don't have to hit home, but you put him off a spot. He's not able to, be as accurate in those situations. I mean, think about with the Browns, right? I mean, we kind of talked about their, man-heavy defense, and, Stroud was kind of in the pocket, not as pressured from them, and just able to make the throws, right? But for a team like the Ravens, like, okay, we play coverage a lot more, a lot better, just because, the scheme and everything, and pressure is better. So, between that, like, it only takes a little bit to kind of throw you off.
I think he was just confused. I think that we just threw a lot at him, and just that he wasn't expecting. I mean, it kind of went back to what I was saying before. He's had a great year, but I also think that he didn't really play that many great defenses, particularly in the second half of the season. So I think it was a big step up in matchup. That's kind of how I felt going into it. I felt the closer we got to the game, the more confident I felt that this was going to be a big win. I just feel like you've got a veteran team in the Ravens in that matchup. They knew what to do. They'd been there before. The Texans, they were trying to figure out what that moment was. I think that showed with some of Stroud's throws, like you're saying. I think that showed with all the false starts and the penalties that the Texans had that certainly didn't help them when the game was close, and buried them when they were starting becoming behind. The Texans will be back. I think this is a team that has a lot of promise. They could be competing with the elite in the AFC as early as next year and be like legitimate, competitors, not just guys in the playoffs making some noise but aren't here for the long haul. Guys, a team that could seriously challenge to be a Super Bowl contender if they make a couple key moves in the offseason. I really think that they have that potential. But in this matchup, I think the better team was clearly the Ravens, and they showed that. And I'm just glad they did, because for a little bit there, it was quite clear who the better team was, and they were just struggling tied with the clearly inferior team. But luckily, worked all in the end.
Yeah, it was definitely one of these things that's not like the other as far as the game went. And eventually it all broke out. I guess, like, what's interesting to me is this, like, Queen situation. So there were two players I felt like they thought they could exploit. They thought they could exploit Queen, and they thought they could exploit Darby. And they weren't entirely wrong. Like, I guess, if you try enough throwing at those guys, eventually they'll have some plays against them. But kind of to your point about, Darby laying up some other under stuff and, Queen's play, like, it just doesn't matter. Like, they hit often enough. The rest of the defense is there often enough. They make splash plays. Darby made some great pass defense plays, and Queen was all over the field per normal. I mean, there's just no place. Like, okay, you want to go after Queen? You want to go after Darby? Feel free. Like, those are two great names to say go after. And the slot corner position has been absolutely deadly between the Hamilton and Millette combination. I mean, it's stacked. The edge rushers are great. Interior linemen, like, there's no place to attack this Ravens defense. And you could just tell that the Texans were, confused. I think I was happy that I chose Hamilton as my playoff jersey. I was like, I want him to be my playoff jersey. And he was shedding, doing his thing, looking great. Nearly had a pick. My heart stopped when he almost had that pick.
Oh, yeah.
But then he like redeemed himself to block the shed a block and stop a play. So just one of those, like, another great player just stepping up. He was great in last year's playoff game in 2022. So yeah, he's definitely I'm expecting more out of him next week.
Yeah, it's funny, going back to Queen too. I feel like even the only knock on Queen is like these running back wheel routes. Really, it's just there's been a couple plays like that where he's just not able to get his head around to make a play. I mean, he's a good position, but just I guess isn't used to playing that way, and so just isn't able to get his head around. But I mean, if you take that, like if we play quarters or anything, you're not going to end up in a situation where he's one-on-one. There's nobody around him. You're going to have somebody else, and like you're not going to make that throw in that coverage, right? So you only have it during certain defensive packages. And two, like if you throw it in the middle of the field where he's able to make a tackle, like you're not picking on him at that point. Like that's what the Ravens want to do in most situations. So yeah, it feels like one of those where it only happens so often. And yeah, you might get a big play, but to your point, Alec, like you have to sustain these really, really long drives. And, that's what you talked about going into it, right? That the Texans are going to have to do that, and good luck, try to do that. And, they weren't able to, was the answer. I wanted to also say, you bring up a good point with Hamilton. Also, Stone, if you're talking about shedding blocks and, making great tackles behind the line of scrimmage, Stone had another great one. He probably honestly could have had holding called on him for the lineman, holding on to him as he's trying to make a tackle. Ended up getting the shoestring. I don't know if it was Hutchinson or Collins. I don't remember who got the ball, but ended up tripping him up. And I think Roquan kind of finished up the tackle, but great effort by Stone. Very similar play to the one you talked about.
And Vanoy had a great stuff behind the line too. On a 3rd and short, he was able to trip up Singletary behind the line there.
Mm-hmm.
Clowney was really disruptive along the line, just across the board. So many guys had big games. Roquan was patrolling sideline to sideline. There's just so much that this defense does well. I do hear what you guys are saying. I do think if you're looking at the weakness of this defense, it is the underneath stuff with tight ends or running back wheel routes with Queen. Those plays, I think, are going to get exploited in this defense. But it almost seems like I think we've watched enough of this McDonald defense to know that, or not to know, but I think to infer that I think they're fine with giving up those yards. I think that they're looking at their scheme, and you can't possibly cover everything, right? So you see that. And you look at these plays, and sure, will they get you an offense like 15, 17 yards at times? Sure. Well, sometimes they go bad. Yeah, I mean, what was it? I think the game against the Colts, Queen did give up a touchdown to Zach Moss on a wheel route. But statistically speaking, I mean, look, the 49ers got tons of those plays, and then the defense hardened up in the red zone, forced turnovers, and it didn't matter. Those plays ended up being empty calories. And so I think that's just kind of what the defense is. It's like, okay, we'll give you those plays because we don't really think that's going to matter in the end. And we're going to harden up on and, prevent the big plays, the back-breaking plays, harden up in the red zone, still apply pressure where it makes sense. And that's just kind of what the philosophy is with this defense. It'll be interesting to see next week because you're going up against one of the greatest offensive minds in NFL history, and Andy Reid. The Chiefs are going to throw a ton at this defense. That's going to be a huge test, and one that's going to be really exciting to see. The chess match that's going to be there between the Chiefs offense and the Ravens defense. But, this defense does a lot of things really well. And I think it's going to be a challenge for Mahomes.
One thing I wanted to talk about before we wrap up the show is, do you think that there's any organizational EDC like scheming going on that PQ has been such a center point of doing media availability and such? Like, he very frequently talks after games, and I'm wondering if they were trying to like really groom him as a face of a franchise kind of guy, so that they give him big money and they get a bigger comp pick out of him. Like, it's just like this like little subtle thing where I feel like they're like intentionally grooming PQ, and it's great that he's been having a good year and stuff too, but like you never see Rowe really have like post-game talks. Maybe it's something he doesn't like to do or something, I don't know, but like he seldom is at the podium. I feel like PQ is like they're trying to groom him.
I don't know.
Maybe.
I mean, he's been. I don't know. I mean, I feel like this is going too much into off-season talk, and we got to talk about the Chiefs, so I don't want to go too much on that. But like, but I mean, he's been a leader of this team for like a long time. Like, I think he's respected in that defense, and even before when Roquan was here. So like, I don't think it's that out of the ordinary, to be honest. But I don't know. I don't look into it much more than that. I mean, he's a great player on this defense. So like, it's not like, I don't know. It's not like having like Geno Stone up there. Like Geno's also a very good player. Don't get me wrong, but like he's not like one of the star players of this team. So you got so many star players on this team. Like you can pick anybody.
I don't even know what this off-season word is. I don't know what this comp picks are. All I know is that Patrick Queen is a guy who's suiting up this coming Sunday against the Kansas City Chiefs in Ravens black helmet, maybe Ravens black jersey and black pants. We'll see. We don't know the threads yet, so.
Yeah, stay locked in, Alec. Come on. What are you doing?
I'll learn about what this off-season word is, after the Ravens are done their business. But sounds like an intriguing topic to talk about, when there's no more football in the 2023-24 season.
All right, fair enough. MVPs, guys. Who you got?
So many guys we can pick. I'm going to go with two guys. And the reason I'm going with these guys is because I think the only way that the Ravens could have lost this game was if they weren't able to contain Nico Collins. Brandon Stevens and Ronald Darby made sure that didn't happen. Did a great job. Nico Collins, 5 catches on 10 targets. His least efficient game since the first time the Ravens played the Texans this year. They stepped up big, so I'm going to give it to them.
Nice. I said his name earlier, but I'm going to go ahead and say Justice Hill. I think he had a lot of great runs. Like I said, convert those second and long situations into third and short, got first downs. I think he was a real key in extending a lot of these late drives that ended up eating a bunch of clock.
I feel like this performance is one of those that breaks the rule of you can't say Lamar Jackson because he's always the MVP, but this was a truly MVP performance from Lamar. And he'll steal it from Clowney, who would probably be my honorable mention because, like I put in the notes, like he's so disruptive. I didn't even feel like writing down all the times. He is. What a incredibly high quality find he was. That wraps it up. We're staying locked in. I'm grateful for the boys keeping me honest. Like lock in. Let's talk about this game and move on to the Chiefs. Fair enough. So next episode will be about those Chiefs, a team that has been in the AFC Conference game way too much over the last few years, and they're there one more time, but this time it's in our house, and hopefully it has a different outcome. So Ravens have the biggest game in Baltimore history, and we can't wait to talk about it. Next episode, we'll see you there.